Meanwhile, on the ship of the damned, Yamcha asks what they can possibly do. Trunks suggests taking the time machine back again and performing a kind of cosmic Control Z, presumably to make the good guys take his warning seriously this time. But Creedine worries that since the time machine isn't perfect, Trunks might not be able to get home if he tries again. And Gohan asks what would happen if they did that, if their artificial humans would just disappear. But then Trunks remembers that that wouldn't happen. Instead, it would create a new timeline where those events were fixed, while having no repercussions on this one, just like how his terrible timeline still exists, despite all the different things that have happened here. This is another one of those plot adhesives that doesn't quite patch things over smoothly. My best guess is that Toriyama arrived at the very question that Gohan did, and it bothered him. If you have a time machine, theoretically, you could have as many chances as you need to get things right. So what if the heroes screw things up? They can just go back and fix it. Change the past. That was the whole point, right? But that wouldn't exactly provide that much of a challenge, and it would make things even more complicated. So instead we're going with an alternate timelines theory of time travel. So Trunks can travel back to a point in the timeline, and his interference causes the timeline to split into alternate versions. One before his interference and one after his interference. That means there are no do-overs. They got their warning, they didn't act on it properly, and now they're screwed. And that's a perfectly valid interpretation of time travel, and I'd say, short of removing their access to time travel, this is the best way to ensure that actions have consequences. But the way it's presented doesn't feel entirely organic. It's one of those pits Toriyama's fallen into because of a seat of his pants writing style, because, while I could be wrong, I have a hard time believing this was Toriyama's initial trajectory with this. And because of that, a lot of the rationalizations feel about as reaching as the character's justifications for refusing to stop the artificial humans ahead of time. It's Toriyama reaching once again and hoping the audience grabs hold. Because Trunks, when first visiting Goku, begs him not to reveal his parentage to the others for fear it will prevent him from being born. Sure, you can rationalize that by saying he's talking about this alternate Trunks, that he wants to make sure this timeline's Trunks is safe. But that doesn't seem to fit what he's saying and how he's presenting it here. It also causes me to wonder how Trunks got back here a second time. His first visit makes sense, there's only one timeline to deal with, but upon making that first visit, he has split the timeline in two. His second trip is to a point in the past, but farther in the future than he initially went. In other words, it's after the split. So why wouldn't he just go back to that point in the past in his timeline? How did he hop into this one? Does he have control over that? Does the time machine just know? If he made 100 visits, how would he even be able to keep track of which is the one he wants to go to? When presented with the obvious question of why did he even bother traveling back in the first place if it would have no effect on him, Trunks states that he hoped to figure out weaknesses, bring Goku back to his future, and that future Bluma just hoped for a timeline, any timeline, that was better. That's a nice sentiment, and those work as legitimate reasons. I'm not saying Toriyama's not managing to fix this, but reading this scene you can definitely see the wheels turning in his head, that he is just trying to cut off every inconsistency a fan could come up with. The explanation works, but I will say Toriyama introduces it rather clumsily. Gohan, the child, is the one who figures out why Trunks' plan wouldn't work, and Trunks, the experienced time traveler, reacts like, oh geez, I never thought about it that way before, right as he launches into every explanation of how he thought about this before. I don't get why Toriyama presented the idea this way. It just makes Trunks seem clueless about something he clearly already knows. It really should have been any of the other characters suggesting they go back in time again, and Trunks immediately explaining why that wouldn't work. But they say that all magic tricks rely on the magician's ability to distract you from the lie while getting you to focus where he wants you to. So Toriyama pulls out a whopper of a distraction in the very same chapter. Kurudin calls Bluma to catch her up on what's going on, but she has even bigger news. There's another time machine out there identical to Trunks's. I think that calls for a dun-dun-dun. Through the cutting-edge power of facts, Bluma shows them an old beaten-up time machine, but clearly the same one as Trunks's, as Trunks's is the only one. Go on, Trunks and Bluma investigate. A farmer sent the info to Bluma hoping for instructions on how to use it, but they're not giving back this sexy piece of time travel goodness. Apparently the hole in the dome was caused by something blasting its way out, and that something seems to have hatched from a bizarre-looking egg inside. As if that wasn't weird enough, it came from age 788, which is 3 years farther in the future than Trunks is from. And at that moment, fans across Japan leapt up from their weekly Shonen Jump copies to sketch out the first Dragon Ball timelines, as this year right here finally sets a calendar system in the Dragon world. You know, unless you count the fact that Dr. Slump is in continuity with Dragon Ball, and it had long since established its use of Gregorian calendar years and brain freeze. Whatever came back in the time machine traveled back to a year before Trunks came back the first time, so this sucker's been here since the end of the Frieza arc. And based on the shape of the recently opened molt, it's apparently some giant creepy bug thing. A few extra artificial humans is one thing, but from Trunks' reaction, I think we've just gone off the map here. God apparently thinks so too, now realizing his sense of foreboding, previously attributed to Trunks' warning, must have been for this. And as such, he concedes to Piccolo's request and allows himself to be assimilated. But wait, what? God has angular text boxes too? Why? He's God! He's not the least bit evil or dark or nefarious or artificial! Why does he have this? He didn't have it in the Frieza arc. It's also not some Namekian thing. Okay, well, you know what? I don't have to worry about it anymore because his character is gone. Other than the fact that I swear his personality takes over Piccolo. The new being waves his goodbyes to Popo, claiming he is neither God nor Piccolo, but a Namekian who has forgotten his true name. But after a few chapters of everyone calling him Piccolo and him refusing the combined name Kamikolo, he just goes with Piccolo, so I'll do the same. The other thing that had set God off was a disturbing attack in Ginger Town, which, and I'm sure this is just a coincidence, is not that far from where the time machine was found. As we see at Kame House, it's reached the news too. The town is completely deserted, save for the clothes of the residents. No, it's not the rapture, and it's not a sudden inclination to get back to nature, as is shown when the newscaster is attacked. By something. Piccolo arrives in Ginger Town and is immediately approached by the creature from the molt, who is holding one of the hapless townspeople. The man begs for help, even offering money, and Piccolo advocates for him, saying that even a life as worthless as this is still a life. Gee, thanks. This Kami must have been more of an Old Testament god than he let on. But despite Piccolo's stirring defense, the creature kills the man anyway, by sticking its tail into him and absorbing him until there's nothing left but his clothes. And it is pretty gruesome, perhaps the most disgusting act Dragon Ball has ever shown, what with the guy literally being drained from the inside out, leaving an empty sack of flesh before that too is gone. The creature knows who Piccolo is, and when it powers up, everybody senses Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, Frieza, and Frieza's father, even though none of them is present at this battle. Even number 16 senses these powers, as unlike his brethren, he is equipped with sensors. He determines that Piccolo, whose new merged energy signature he doesn't recognize, is stronger than number 17 and number 18, which number 17 dismisses as a malfunction. Hey, it's nice to know that Piccolo's new power-up means something. He's now stronger than number 17 and number 18, who had totally kicked his butt before. I sure hope this goes somewhere and isn't totally wasted. Piccolo and the creature begin fighting, and it shocks Piccolo by being able to use a Kamehameha. Personally, while I admit this is a bit odd in regards to how a talking bug man could learn this, I don't really get why this is supposed to be as mind-boggling as it's presented. As iconic as the Kamehameha is, it's really treated, even much earlier in the series, as Baby's first ki attack. It's really about as basic as ki manipulation gets. The hand gesture is literally the only defining trait it has. Ten Shinhan in his initial appearance mocks how basic it is by showing one off without any previous exposure to it. The creature doing it is supposed to hint at how biologically connected it is to Goku. But just because the Kamehameha is Goku's signature move doesn't mean it's an intrinsic part of him. It's just a calling card like Harry Potter and the Expelliarmus spell, not a move that's even remotely unique to him. It doesn't help that very soon after this, Cell is going to use the Taioken to escape, leading to one character commenting that it's Ten Shinhan's move. However, another character is going to immediately dismiss it by saying, "Oh yeah, but everybody else can do that too." Unlike the Kamehameha, I guess. So is it surprising? Yes. But not nearly as big a bombshell as the stuff he's already said and done. Now if he pulled off a Kaioken, that would have raised some eyebrows. The creature drops tantalizing hints about how he'd had to revert back to an egg to fit into the time machine, and that he needed to come back to this time to reach his perfect form. Now this is all that was needed for now. Toriyama has cultivated a very intriguing mystery here. A new threat, another time machine, time travel antics even Trunks doesn't know about, all perpetrated by a truly unsettling creature with horrific powers emitting ki from other characters. What works about Cell's introduction, and I'll go ahead and start calling him Cell, is that everything about him is mysterious. Nothing makes sense. Rather than becoming clearer, the more we see of him, the more confusing he becomes. And then that's just immediately flushed down the toilet. He tells Piccolo everything. He's a Dr. Gero bio-creation, created from the cells of the heroes and villains. There's a hidden lab below the one they destroyed, where he's currently in his embryonic state, still developing. He needs to absorb number 17 and number 18 to become perfect. He's from farther in the future, after Trunks manages to destroy number 17 and number 18, so he came back here to a time where they still exist. And for all those people confused in the comments section about how Dr. Gero doesn't know about super science, despite the fact Cell says he has cells from the Mecha Frieza fight, he even explains he was an abandoned project, and that the computer continued working on him independently. So at least I can definitively put that to rest now. But back to the matter at hand, I can't wrap my head around why Toriyama would do this. That is to say, I don't get why he'd set up this puzzle only to ruin it so spectacularly. There's nothing wrong with Cell's backstory, given that it's once again a huge rewrite being shoved into the story, and I'll get back to that later. It not only manages to fit relatively well, and incorporate the already existing villains into Cell's plot, but they're intriguing ideas all on their own. But intriguing ideas do not necessarily make for intriguing stories. Execution is very important, and the execution here is just so regrettably bad. It just makes you pine for how much better it could have been if these narrative threads hadn't just been dumped onto the page. There's so much intrigue with Cell, so much that tantalizes the imagination, and all of that is lost when you're told everything about him. Cell is also the closest the Dragon Ball series gets to a slasher villain, and they work best from the shadows. Having him come out and nonchalantly monologue his evil plans just disarms the menace of him right off the bat. Okay, it's a smart moment for Piccolo to feign injury so Cell will lower his guard and tell him this. However, Piccolo asked before and Cell refused on the grounds that there was no point, as Cell was about to absorb him anyway. That hasn't changed. So this just introduces Cell as a really stupid villain, because now the heroes know exactly what he intends to do, and it puts them in a much better position to do something about it. Just imagine how much more effective this would all be if Cell had only told Piccolo his name, that he killed Trunks and sent himself back in the time machine, and that he was attempting to become perfect. Then, the heroes would actually have to figure out this mystery. So let's say they go back to the remnants of Dr. Gero's laboratory, not because they already know present-day Cell is there and easy pickings to be killed, but because they've already talked about wanting to get their hands on a shutdown controller for the artificial humans. So they go there to see if they can find any leads. Instead, they find this second lab and discover what is clearly an embryonic form of Cell. The plot thickens. This cell is a Dr. Gero creation as well, but it's something they learn, not something they're told. Then later on they find evidence that Cell has gotten into a scuffle with the artificial humans. Maybe he manages to absorb one of them. Maybe they manage to get away. Either way, the mystery deepens again. Why would this Dr. Gero artificial human be fighting against his own kind? Upon examining the schematics they found at the lab, they realize number 17 and number 18 have elements intended for Cell to use. See what I mean? When an author sets up a mystery, you want to follow along with the characters as they uncover it. You want to be in their shoes, trying to piece together everything yourself. Going about it this way just makes you feel shortchanged. Ooh, how mysterious! Oh wait, never mind. And this arc is already full of instances of character from the future tells the heroes exactly what to do. It seems it's the only way Toriyama can think of to advance the story. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Toriyama can't even seem to keep his own timelines consistent anymore. Trunks had said Cell arrived 4 years ago, a year before Trunks visited them. And Cell says that he didn't set the time machine. Trunks had already done that, leading Piccolo to surmise that Trunks was going back to tell them he'd beaten the artificial humans. Why would he go back a year before they knew who he was and have no idea what he was talking about? Cell says it takes 3 years for him to grow from an egg, but he's been here for 4 years and his molt was fresh. I mean, you'd think God would have more than just a bad feeling about this if this doomsday weapon was walking around Earth for an entire year. That's not even getting into the fact that he can apparently revert from adult to egg instantly, but it takes him 3 years to regrow. He says in this timeline he won't be mature for another 24 years, which really doesn't make any sense given Trunks' age, so Daizenshu 7 had to rationalize it as him meaning 24 years total, and that a lot of that development had already passed. Cell says they decided against taking Trunks' cells from the battle with Mecha Frieza, but if Cell is from future Trunks' timeline, then Trunks wouldn't have been in that battle in the first place. The point is, it takes a very meticulous mind to keep track of the kinds of details that time travel stories necessitate, especially when you have multiple timelines to keep track of. And as much as I deeply respect Toriyama's storytelling abilities, he doesn't strike me as the type of person who has a very meticulous mind. The guidebooks had to come along years later to try to package all these various timelines and tidbits into something that made sense, and even they have their own problems, and I'm not even going to get into all that. I love me some time travel, but all this complicated stuff is giving me a headache. So it's a good thing it's time to take a break. And I can't think of a better place to vacation than New Namek, with its green skies, blue trees, robotic conquerors. That's right. Next time, we're taking a look at the first movie of 1992, Clash, 10 Billion Powerful Warriors, featuring the return of Kula. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. Tell your friends about this channel, and if you're new to Dragon Ball Dissection and want to see more, here are 79 videos to catch up on. Enjoy!